Well, it's an offline video time. Been a while since I've done one of those, but I came across something on Twitter that I just kind of had to investigate myself. Now, this is from Moya Lothian-McLean, who is the contributing editor at Novara Media, who sometimes does Novara Live as well. And she tweeted out a couple of things I thought was worth actually looking into. So, she had a truly bizarre exchange on Sky News. She was told she was going to be initially a 10-minute interview about misogyny and the GB News incident. She then got an email saying that it was a discussion. 1 minute to go on air, and suddenly it's a debate about free speech. I explained this on air, but in the ensuing conversation, I couldn't help but laugh. My opposite ended up asking me accusingly who invented the patriarchy. Surely we want more from our media discussions. He seemed to think I was getting paid for it, so I assume he was. Watch it back here for yourself. Actually, because I can't stop laughing. Now, I found the little clip. I have done a recording of it so that we can react to it. And I've pre-watched this, to be fair, so this won't be an initial reaction. This will be my thoughts upon what I've already seen. But it's definitely worth watching. Let's have a look.
So we're asking tonight, what are the limits of free speech? To help me discuss this further, I'm joined by Moya Lothian-McLean, a contributing editor at Novara Media, and the writer, podcaster and GB News contributor Connor Tomlinson. Welcome to both of you. Is this even free speech, Connor, framing a woman only within the parameters of her body and her sexual attractiveness, or just plain old-fashioned, and I mean old-fashioned sexism?
The two aren't incompatible. It is free speech. You can object to it and say that it's crass. Again, I know Lawrence, he's a loose cannon and a bit of an agent of chaos, and it certainly isn't the tactic that I would have used to critique Ava. It's not the tactic that...
A tactic? I mean, it's just... But she was just being awful, right? If you want to critique somebody, if you want to tactically critique somebody, I would say maybe engage with their arguments, or their points, or their ideology, rather than just saying, I wouldn't have sex with them. It doesn't seem like a tactic to me.
I used when I was on Piers Morgan with Ava about a year ago in a clip that did the rounds on certain manosphere Instagram accounts because what she said was quite egregious, but I didn't go to that level. However, it doesn't matter about the content of what he said. If GB News are styling themselves as the home of free speech, then they shouldn't kick him off the air just because he says something crass. Instead, they should allow him to continue to host his show, and if the viewers object to what he has said, if the viewer ratings go down, then they can decide whether or not to renew his show if enough of the viewers, rather than people on Twitter who don't watch the network and want it to succeed anyway, if they don't tune into it and complain about it.
I mean, there is a correct point there in that what really matters as far as the free speech network is concerned is, do they want to have somebody on the books who they think damages their brand image? And it's clear that they do, given all the things that he has said elsewhere. It's clear that this is a line they feel that they've crossed far enough for them to not want him to host their shows anymore for the sake of their brand image, and one can only assume their future revenue. So the viewers basically will decide. They have already kind of decided at GB News they feel they would lose more viewers than they would gain if they kept him on rather than getting rid of him. So they think it's best for their future viewership to do that. And that's not an untrue point made by Mr. Tomlinson there.
Fine that he said it in the context of free speech, and he should be allowed to stay on the channel and say the same sort of thing again. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying I object to it, but he should be allowed to say it, and the viewers can make up their mind as to whether or not they want to watch it.
You find it offensive?
Or the GB News crew and the commissioning editors can decide whether or not they want to commission him to be on there again, if that would give negative press for them, and then might affect future viewership as well, rather than just the idea they can keep platforming them and then viewers can go elsewhere if they want. I mean, they can go elsewhere if they want, that's fine. I mean, he is correct to say that it is a free speech issue, but it is not indeed anti-free speech for a private company to make decisions in the interests of profit if you are indeed someone who believes in the free market, as Connor indeed does.
If they were not.
I'm not personally offended by something that wasn't said to me, but I wouldn't say that. I don't think it's convincing, and I think it's rude.
So, Moya, why is this so much worse than other comments we might hear from people like Lawrence Fox or others? Why does this, for so many people, tip over the edge of reasonable comment?
I want to address something here. Speech is free. They said what they said because they have free speech. They have freedom of expression. However, when you're a broadcaster, you're guided by broadcasting codes. Now, the two presenters are being investigated under normal procedures that go ahead. They may not be found to have breached any broadcasting codes, whether internally or whether Ofcom complaints are taken forward. However, to pose another question, should we not...
And also, it's true, like Moya is absolutely correct here. Again, it is not anti-free speech for you to sign up to being a broadcaster and therefore abide by the broadcasting codes, and then fall foul of those rules and therefore have your broadcasting ability revoked from you. It's just like if you sign up to go on 4chan and you start posting My Little Pony on B, that's why they will ban your account. Or if you start posting something that is against the Twitter terms of service that you agreed to when you created your account. That is the terms of the platform to ensure the function of the platform in future. Like, if you say something they disagree with outside of those parameters, then you might have an argument. But you implicitly agree to those rule sets by engaging with that platform, whether it be social media, whether it be a broadcasting network, or whether it be an image board, for example.
Be discussing instead why two broadcasters on a platform that claims it has aspirations to be the next BBC would want to exercise their right to free speech with that exchange. And should we not also be talking about the fact that misogyny was used as a vehicle? Lawrence Fox showed on social media the exchanges that had gone on before they talked about that on air. Dan Wootton issued a full apology claiming that he didn't know anything about it. It was an off-the-cuff moment. Lawrence Fox showed text messages and producer setups beforehand that had outlined what exactly he was going to say about Ava Evans. And I do think this is, as Ava herself has said, a production issue. This is where it becomes entertainment. And I think there's an example sitting here.
I mean, she's right. I mean, they literally list themselves as an entertainment channel, not as a news channel, despite the name. This is how they can theoretically break what would be the broadcasting code if they were a news channel for sitting MPs to interview other ministers or MPs in, like, cabinet positions, for example, without falling foul of due objectivity, because it's not a news channel, it is an entertainment show. A current affairs entertainment show, which is subject to a different rule set than if it was officially a news program, which of course Sky News is.
Invited on tonight to talk about misogyny in media. Then I was told we were going to have a discussion in general. A minute before broadcast, suddenly this is a debate about free speech. It doesn't make any sense to me. My focus here is the misogyny and why that became an entertainment vehicle.
Okay, so what?
And again, this is something that happens in the media all the time, where the narrative that gets spun is the one that they think will get them the most views and therefore the most capital, and not indeed the one which is the most pertinent to the discussion. Now, we can have a debate on whether we think that we should be talking about free speech or whether we should be talking about misogyny in media, but the fact that Sky News felt the need to change this up given the context of the discussion and to change the framing, having already briefed out that this was a discussion on misogyny, just shows where indeed Sky News will want to take these discussions to ensure the most viewers rather than the most pertinent discussion topic.
What is your problem with that then? Right, specifically the comments made by Lawrence Fox about misogyny.
What is my problem with Lawrence Fox saying something so disgustingly misogynistic that is being broadcast to an audience while his fellow broadcaster laughs along, and the only thing that he says in the defense of this woman is she's very beautiful, which is more misogyny. It's the idea that women in all these walks of life are being disrespected on a fundamental level. It's baked in to our society. It's baked into our media. It's baked into the social media that people are consuming. There's a reason that, organizations that work in schools with young people are reporting a huge increase in misogyny and rape culture. It comes from the top down. Young children are seeing this from social media influencers, and they grow up and they see it from these adult politics influencers. Lawrence Fox has founded a political party. He asked us to take him seriously, and yet he's saying stuff like that. And you've got people coming on here defending his right to free speech. Well, he had the right to free speech. He said it very freely. He is now just finding the consequences of the free speech and an investigation that would follow anyone potentially breaking broadcasting codes.
Well,
and she's right in saying that it is misogyny that underpins this, because the idea that on what is actually, it's an entertainment show, but it kind of purports to be a news program despite its categorization being elsewhere. Essentially bringing on somebody to say, I would not engage in intercourse with a woman. Would they ever say that about a man? Like, when have you ever heard that on anything purporting to be, even like a regular other current affairs entertainment program? Have you ever heard anybody say that about a man? Of course you haven't. They never have. It's something that is exclusive to the way we discuss women in media and more broadly in society.
Connor, let's pick up on that sort of the labelling of women element of this. Has this specific tone of at times conspiracy-laden, often right-wing, occasionally misogynistic freedom of expression now been let out of the bottle? Is the genie out of the bag, never to go back in? And if so, what does that mean about how some men look at women in society?
Okay, that entire question was just laden with buzzwords which basically mean nothing to anyone who doesn't buy into those presuppositions. Conspiracy-laden...
I mean, misogyny surely means something. It's something which has, I've heard it say dictionary definition, but a colloquially understood, societally understood definition of people who see women as lesser or treat women worse or have a fundamental kind of hatred of women as well, or these kind of underlying biases against them. I think that is a broad understanding of what we would mean by misogyny. To say that people don't understand what that means, or indeed the term right-wing, I think we all have a pretty reasonable and consistent understanding of what right-wing means. Say it's just a buzzword. I don't know what you mean about that.
Right-wing, are those meant to be insults and pejoratives, or are they just meant to be your value judgment of his positions, which are outside of this statement? We can judge this statement as being offensive.
It's based on what we've seen in America, the sort of the Trumpian politics we've seen,
You're
the framing of culture wars.
More like other things. These aren't things that Lawrence has said. How about we focus on the actual statement rather than making it too broad?
Well, the thing is, the discussion is a broader discussion around misogyny, or at least it was before it became a debate about free speech. And indeed, it is indicative of what Moya was talking about, of this culture that is more apparent than it used to be. It's more prominent than it used to be, with people like Andrew Tate and the manosphere influencers around there. I mean, we've all seen the clip of Sneeko with the kids saying egregious misogynistic statements around him, and him making this really kind of distressed face to camera, thinking about, well, what he's created, the kind of lines that are being parroted, the kind of culture that this perpetuates. And these are all intimately linked together. I don't know how you can take these out of each other, out of the broader context.
I can actually say something to Moya. This is a question. Okay, I agree. It's totally understandable to interpret what Lawrence has said as offensive. So, from what...
I don't care about offence. I don't care if people think something's offensive. I care about the broader utility of what happens if these people are allowed to break broadcasting code in such a way, and the ramifications of these views continually being perpetuated, right? That's what we have the broadcasting codes in place for, to be able to protect against any negative externalities for the kind of things people say within a broadcasting setting. The broadcasting is a very powerful medium that you have, and the kind of things and messages that you spread can travel far and wide. And therefore, the kind of things that can happen, like what we saw just today about a girl being attacked because she refused a boy trying to give her flowers, these are all part of that same kind of societal misogyny that Moya was talking about at the start. It's a whole culture, it's a whole structure. So to just say that we have to completely ignore the broader perspective on this, I think is really short-sighted.
Ava said to me, for something that she wasn't investigated for over a year ago, she's still invited onto networks, the same show by Piers. Piers came out and defended her for this. Ava said that women should be able to weaponise false rape allegations in order to keep men afraid of actually committing sexual assault.
Now, this is not true. I obviously watched this, so I know. This is, if you look, the clip that he's referring to, because this is the statement that he tweeted out. Does anyone remember last year when Ava said women are entitled to weaponise false rape accusations to terrify men, and implied my friends and I are words in waiting? Let me play the clip.
It's hard enough being a young teenager, working out how things are, working out how to do dating and all of that, without the terror that if you touch in the wrong place at the wrong time, you may find that your whole life is destroyed.
See, I
and there
like
is
that
far
terror.
too much. Well,
I like that.
As a
I
mother
think
of
that
a
men
teenage
should be
boy, I
frightened.
don't like
Really?
that terror.
Well, the thing is, the discussion here was about the idea that someone might not know what they're doing, and then would potentially have their life ruined because of like a misunderstanding, or because they've not properly been taught about consent. And that kind of terror, what Ava is talking about here, might make boys and men might think twice before engaging in this stuff to ensure that they have proper consent. Now, she goes on in this clip to talk about why this, if you're so scared that this might happen to people, why not focus more on things like consent lessons? This makes sure people always understand about what is and is not consensual and how to go about getting proper consent. And I think there is some merit to that. I disagree with the idea that what Connor said later in this clip is that somehow everyone knows whether or not they have consent or not, because that's just not true. That's not true. I mean, to be fair, maybe that shows that he doesn't quite understand consent himself. Probably should go get some education on that kind of thing. But as someone who has been engaging in these kind of things for a very long time, I'm 32 now, I understand when people know that there are plenty of men who really don't have a properly good understanding of consent. I've interacted with that kind of stuff. Believe me. There are plenty of times. I think the Brussels Brand allegation should understand how iffy consent is. Because if Russell Brand is to be believed in, he was on the understanding that everything was consensual. That clearly was not communicated by all the women that he was with at the time. It clearly wasn't communicated. And I think a lot of women who are watching this will have seen plenty of times where they've never given explicit consent of men who have gone further than they're expected to. So the idea that this was trying to claim that Ava was engaging in trying to weaponise false rape accusations, that's a complete misrepresentation of everything that she said there from Connor.
And when I questioned this, she implied that myself and my friends would only be afraid of this if we are potential rapists. She suffered no repercussions for that. So,
if you're, either you know about how consent works, and if you do, then you're either willingly doing so or not willingly doing so, or you don't understand how consent works, in which case you might unwillingly commit these kind of things. And that's why consent is important. And if you do understand consent, then you shouldn't be scared because you've got the proper consent beforehand.
Do you agree that if misogynistic insults and misogynistic remarks are offensive and they shouldn't be allowed on air, misandric, man-hating remarks and encouraging a culture of fear that means that young men are terrified of asking out young women should also not be allowed? Should Ava suffer consequences for that?
I mean, she didn't say anything misandrist. Like, I'm sorry. Saying that men should understand consent better, and that if they don't understand consent, then that they should be scared about maybe violating a consensual boundary. There's nothing wrong with anything that she said there. But to imply that that is somehow in any way similar to what Lawrence Fox said about Ava Santina on JB News is the most stunning level of false equivalency I think I've seen in quite a while.
Sorry, I don't understand why we're discussing this when we're talking about the culture of misogyny that is endemic in society.
Because
I don't understand why you've turned it onto a silly little incident, which I watched, by the way, and it wasn't represented in the way that you're talking about it. I think it was a clumsy remark from her, but she was there. She was present. You were both present. You were having a discussion. This is talking. Ava is not even actually the focus almost of this. She could have been any woman that Lawrence Fox was talking about, that Dan Wootton was talking about. The point is that misogyny was used as an entertainment vehicle. And the most humiliating thing they could think of to say about a woman journalist was that they wouldn't have sex with her.
What about when incels thrown around as an insult? If that was so bad. Hang on. I just finished. You just finished what you said.
What? When was anybody on like a major current affairs program ever referred to anybody as an insult? Is an incel flippantly and as an insult? Again, all of these weird false equivalencies, right? All of these whataboutisms.
When insults thrown around as an insult for men who also aren't worthy of having sex with, that's a value judgment used by plenty of feminists in media. Should that also not be allowed to be used?
I'm so tired because...
See, and again, where has that been in media? Where is it specifically? This been used specifically as a term for men who women won't want to have sex with? Has it ever been that? I think it's mostly just been used as an insult for the kind of people who would engage in the kind of casual misogyny Lawrence Fox engaged with on GB News, right? I don't think it's a very useful term to be thrown around, but it's clearly a problem. The incel community has been a problem. I mean, look at the kind of Elliot Rodgers style violence that's been meted out. And on top of that, most the context when people use it flippantly as an insult is nothing to do whether people would have sex with them or not. This is a weird false equivalence. Again, another whataboutism. Not engaging with the actual topic of discussion, but trying to deflect to something else.
The thing is,
you can't answer the question, so you then dismiss it.
I can answer the question. I'm about to answer the question. I can answer the question, but I'm saying that I'm tired. I'm tired because we live in a patriarchal society, and I'm sure you're going to call that a buzzword, which means a patriarchal society. It means that endemically, women suffer from economic inequality. They suffer from more health inequalities. They suffer from gender inequality across the board because of the way society is structured. That is a simple fact. Whether you like it or not, it doesn't.
It's not conspiracy to say that society is structured in a certain way. Oh, that's why you hate liberals. Oh, that's why I hate liberal ideology so much. In that everything has to be individualized down to specific actions that's been taken. No one invented the patriarchy, which is a question that's going to come up here from the tweet that Moya sent out in the reply to the original discussion of this. That no one invents these societal structures. Nobody invented racism, right? There may have been certain people who tried to engage in scientific racism, and then the points that they made there might have been correlated and broadcasted out towards society who then picked up on those notions. But there was no one person who was the founder of racism, in the same way no one was the founder of misogyny or the founder of the patriarchy. That's not how systems work. That's not how capitalism works. Capitalism naturally evolved out of feudalism, for example. It was a natural result of the enclosure of the commons, and then that system perpetuated out from there continually. There wasn't Mr. Capitalism, who was the founder of capitalism, the originator of the capitalist mode of production. The idea that there is an individual responsible for the patriarchy is such liberal fucking hogwash.
It doesn't mean that men don't feel pain. It doesn't mean that men don't suffer from things that women suffer from. It just means that women are at the sharpest end of it. And it means that structurally, we face things like misogyny, which put us in a much less powerful position. And when we're in economic dire straits like the country is now, what we know is that poverty fuels things like misogyny. It fuels things like racism. It fuels marginalized demographics suffer the most when people feel economically squeezed. This is part of a wider question of where Britain is going right now. And the fact that we're having this polarized discussion once again, which is getting boiled down into these individual incidents, rather than looking at the broader picture, Lawrence Fox and what Lawrence Fox felt enabled to say is because of a much wider picture. And it's tiring to me. It's so tiring to me as a woman to come on here.
I'm sorry you're so exhausted to be paid to go on air.
I'm not paid. I'm not being paid for this interview. I came on because I wanted to talk about the problem of misogyny. And
even then, like, even if she was being paid, Money is not going to solve an individual person getting money. Again, individualized problems rather than structural problems. That's not going to make the misogyny any less bad, Connor.
The degradation of women in public life. That doesn't mean men don't suffer individual insults. It just means there's a wider framework at play, which means that women
Where
are systemically
hasn't the patriarchy
oppressed.
existed? Where hasn't the patriarchy existed?
What are you talking about?
No,
Where's the
hang on.
patriarchy not existed?
Yes, I'm asking.
I mean, even that. I mean, I will answer this question basically nowhere. You want to find me a matriarchal society, go ahead, or fine, I'll have a look at it. But when you look at basically the entirety of human history, there has always been this level of patriarchy, which mostly boils down to, in historical terms, men's physical strength, which usually has been the threat of violence, right? In days of yore, let's go with that, right? But in the modern society, these things are getting broken down through initially liberalism and the kind of the feminist wave of the last kind of 50 years, 60, 70 years or so. I mean, the fact that women only really got to vote after hundreds of years of democracy just tells you where these patriarchal attitudes come from, and they didn't come from nowhere either. They were born out of the same kind of understanding of dismissive attitudes towards women that have pervaded society since its inception.
Yeah,
Why
that's
do
what
you
I'm
bring
asking
up
the
these
question.
random, wide, broad questions?
You've just
It's
gone on a
just so
wide, broad rant
tiring.
accusing the entire of civilization being systemically rigged
I didn't
against you.
just
So
I
I'm
talked
saying,
about British society today.
I'll say that it systemically has been rigged against women since the start of civilization. Yeah, go for it. Fine. Come at me.
There's plenty of statistics and empirical evidence, and I don't feel like I
Okay,
have to constantly explain myself to someone like you. I'm talking to the audience.
Where was patriarchy not existing? This is an important question because you're basically accusing pretty much every civilization before we could even translate each other's languages and communicate with each other being set up in the same way against
women. Where have you got
women.
that from? You're pulling
Because
this out your
what is your
bum.
conception? I'm not. What is the conception of patriarchy you're accusing? And also, how does this
Coming on here
feed?
to talk about instant or GB News and wider
I know, I
societal
agree.
misogyny.
You're the one
and
that broadened
sitting
it
here
out.
asking me to do a history of gender, whereas patriarchy
You broadened
not
it out. You
existed.
made the accusation, the burden of proof.
I said it's a social problem, which it is in Britain. It's a social
Okay, and who's
problem.
engineering the social problem? This is the thing. As soon as you
Oh, sorry.
Again, no one has to engineer something. The fact that these people are so attached to the idea of conspiracy that they think that everyone who has a kind of materialist understanding of history and a materialist understanding of society must therefore also have their own little conspiracy they believe in. No one invented this. No one's the progenitor. There isn't patriarchy patient zero.
Is there a specific person who's engineering this problem rather than it's baked into structures and has developed over the years? What is this?
Well,
Are you getting paid for this? I'm not getting paid for this. Are you getting paid for this?
This is what you're accusing civilization of. You're accusing it of being rigged against people, and somehow Lawrence Fox's comment, which sure was rude, is rigging the whole civilization against women. That's just an absurd.
No, you're
No, it's a part of the system. The system is what enabled him to be on there in the first place. So the things that he said he was going to say got through everybody who was checking at GB News when he was telling people what their plan was before the segment aired. If there wasn't this level of misogyny, that never would have hit everybody's screens. That they wouldn't have said it in the first place. Oh my God, these people are liberals. Infuriating.
extrapolating and reducing it, and I would expect nothing less. But I would love it if we get back to the point in hand.
Please do.
I think we've all forgotten what it is, haven't we? To be honest with you. I think I might put Moya out of her misery. I'm sorry you're tired,
There's
Moya.
no misery. There's no misery. It's just tiring to constantly rub up against these ridiculous discussions instead of having a progressive, useful chat that might actually see us tackle misogyny.
But maybe what
in
Connor is saying, that men are also feeling hard done by.
But
here,
I said
feeling
that. I said that men.
I didn't say that. I didn't say
I
that.
said that.
Well,
I said
okay,
very. Oh, Connor's not saying that at all. Apparently.
What Connor? Just what are you saying?
I'm saying that the entire civilization is
paid
not
to.
rigged against women. I'm just saying what I believe. And
It's about misogyny being a societal structure, right? Not that all of society is explicitly rigged against women in every single capacity, in every single facet, but there is a broader culture, a broader societal problem of women being underrepresented, women being undervalued, the contribution of women being undervalued, and their voices being undervalued, right? That's what it is in certain situations within certain remits, not that literally every single facet of society is rigged against women.
Funnily enough, one of the things that does link to this came off the back of the conversation that Ava was having on BBC Politics Live, of where she wasn't willing to say that we need a minister for men like we do for a minister for women. Now, I'm perfectly happy that there's a minister for women, but there's a prefixed ideological commitment that also you, Moya, have, which says
What?
hang on, I didn't even finish my sentence, right? That says that Ava is committed to this position, that we cannot have a minister for men because it somehow undermines the ideas of feminism. That's the thing that was being retaliated to in a very rude way.
Well,
And this
Ava's
is the
not
conversation
here.
you
We don't want to
broadened it out
start talking about what Ava said.
And again, that's not relevant. That's not relevant to the way in which empowered Lawrence Fox to say the things that he said. Did I have criticisms of the way Ava Santina handled that discussion on Politics Live? Yes, I detailed that when I reacted to it live on stream and when I covered the initial comments earlier on today. But that's nothing to do with the specific misogynist culture that allowed Lawrence Fox to say the things that he said after getting through everybody who was checking the things that he was going to say before that segment aired.